Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And thank you to Shelley and Deborah and the International Leadership Association for sponsoring this opportunity. Today, we're going to talk about a new textbook and the ideas behind it, Discovering Leadership, Designing Your Success. Joining me today are Scott Allen from John Carroll University.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Mindy McNutt from Wright State University.
Hi, everyone.
And Dr. Jim Morrison from the University of Delaware.
Hi, everyone.
Please note that this webinar is being recorded so you can review it later, and questions are welcomed. We have a lot of material to cover. We're going to probably go through it a little fast. I apologize for that, but you can review it and ask questions. You can submit questions along the way by clicking the little question mark in the upper right hand of your screen. So we'll also put our emails up at the end, so you can email us individually at any time in the future. We welcome those. Thanks. So to give you a sense of where we're going, here's kind of an overview. I will start with a little bit of the why behind the book and how the design perspective informs the work as a framework, as a toolkit, and as a general approach to leadership. I'll also introduce the other framing idea of the text that we call CORE, which stands for Confidence, Optimism, Resilience, and Engagement. And it solves a key problem that I think we've all wrestled with as leadership educators. Following that, each of my co-authors will share some of their insights from the work. And lastly, we focus on designing your success, and we introduce a couple of tools that we think will significantly design your success and the success of your students. So beyond that, we'll have some time at the end to address questions. So let's get started with the why, assuming I can work this PowerPoint. Here we go. Thanks, Scott. Off we go. Okay, why this book? Well, let me tell you why. Because in the past, prior leadership books that I've used were just the wrong size for waking up students. Some are too small, some are too unwieldy. This one is perfect, waking them up. But realistically, we've wrestled with some problems as leadership educators, and I'm sure most of you have as well. The first one is the real world problem. And that basically says, I have a leadership position, and now what do I do? And from our perspective, we wanted a tool that was accessible and practical and interactive, something that people could grab and use immediately, because let's face it, people tend not to. The practical practice problem, so much information and so little curation and so little time. And so students are bamboozled, as are we at times, by all the information that's out there. I call this the my real world problem. And that is, I'm not a CEO. So reading this book that was written by a CEO about how he or she was successful in that role doesn't really work for me. And I'm not a professor. And so I need someone to translate those theories for me. And finally, the future me problem. And this is the biggest problem that I think many of us face. And that is, we have undergraduate students, or we have individuals who are not necessarily in a leadership position. They don't recognize the challenges that they're going to be facing in the future. And frankly, they can't predict those anyway. And so what do we teach them now? What do we build now to deal with that? So we decided to consider leadership from a new perspective, design. And why design? Well, if you look around you right now at all the things in the room, perhaps your eyeglasses, your computer, your light fixtures, your chair, even your hairstyle, all of those were designed. They were designed purposefully, and if they weren't, they probably didn't turn out so well. So imagine you're going to design something new, a coffee cup, a car, a haircut, website, something more abstract like a workshop or an organization. And you would want to be purposeful with it, you'd want to be mindful, and you would want to design for something we call affordance, which basically is the best fit. The more we know about leadership, the more we realize that it really is about finding the right fit for your skills, your style, how you are perceived, and the context that you're after. So with that, we took that perspective and broke it into three pieces: design as an approach, design as a framework, and design as a toolkit. And we're going to talk about the first one here, design as a framework. So if you think about how you function as a leader, essentially, you're first needing to design yourself. And a lot of leadership programs and courses start with how do you find your strengths? How do you find your style? What are the things that you are like? What's your emotional intelligence? Ultimately focused on designing yourself. And if you're doing that in a purposeful, mindful, and best fit kind of way, that's what we're after. Then we expand out to designing your relationships between other people. Then we move it to designing other people's success, then expanding it out to designing the culture, and then ultimately designing the future. And these neatly align with our definition of leadership. So as you can see in this chart, there's a key question that emerges from those. Designing self, leadership is a process of influencing others toward a common vision. This laid the groundwork for the framework of the textbook. And as you look at this chart, I know it's a lot of information. I apologize for that. Over on the left-hand column, you've got 5 different modules, each comprising 3 chapters. And so we're focusing on designing yourself, relationships, other success, culture and community, and the future. So it's a foundational text, but it also adds a lot of new ways of thinking about things. And we'll talk about the value of that in a little bit. So design leadership as a toolkit. So the design world and designers actually have lots of tools that they use to create what it is they're going to create for the users for the best use. And as you can see, design process, design thinking, and design principles, some of these may be familiar to you. I'm going to walk through them very quickly. And I should probably slow down a little. Okay, design process. Tools for solving problems. Good design, as you can see here, is really about problem solving. It offers a more sophisticated perspective. So every semester I give my students a challenge. I'm teaching them creativity vis-a-vis leadership, and I say go out and find a go out and find a creativity process, an innovation process. Find anyone you want, Apple, Microsoft, a theory by a professor, all these processes. If anyone can find a process where there are steps that do not fall into understand, imagine, or implement, I offer them lunch. And of course, now, after 10 years of this, I haven't had to purchase lunch yet. Because the reality is, all of those processes emphasize different things, but the important thing is that we honor a process. In other words, what do we need to do to understand a problem when we're in a leadership position? What do we incorporate to generate lots of ideas as a leader? And of course, what are the different things we need to do to implement? Not honoring the process, shortchanging it in some ways, which often happens not just to leaders, but to designers in different fields, you end up with not the most innovative solution that you're looking for. Design thinking. This image might be familiar to many of you. This is Stanford's D-School design thinking process. And ironically, they call it a process because it is a process. And so we take design thinking to a different dimension. For us, design thinking comprises mental habits, thinking habits, or dispositions that you can enhance to improve whatever design you're working on. So building those mental habits, as you can see, many of them relate to the Stanford process. Of course they do, because they're meant to enhance your problem-solving process. But if you take those and put them to use in terms of leadership and how we can effectively apply those, here, for example, are 6 questions of design leadership prompted by those design thinking capacities. So, for example, explorative. Well, what more do I as a leader need to learn, explore, understand in order to fully make the right decisions, solve the problems effectively? User-centered. I can't tell you how many times I sit in meetings with university administrators, and maybe you've experienced this too, where people start talking about a new project and they're very excited about it. And I'll kind of meekly raise my hand because, I'm a small fish in the pond. And I'll say, has anyone asked the students what they think about this? And of course, silence. And then oddly, they ignore me and move on. But if you are a leader who's got a user-centered mindset, you're going to ask that, and you're going to end up with a more successful outcome. And lastly, design principles. Design principles are tools and rules that designers use to enhance their design. And in fact, there are 40 of these rules featured across the textbook, where we define it, we give you an example of it in real life, and then we give you the translation of it for leadership. So for example, if you're trying to take a picture, the notion of balance is an important thing to think about, whether you purposefully want something balanced or not. Well, that prompts the question for leaders, what are all the balances that you have to deal with? What are all the things that you need to balance? Likewise, focal point, one of my favorite pictures. So clearly, some interesting focal points in this picture. But for a leader, what is the focal point that you want? What do you want people to be seeing and understanding in the way that you work with them? So that's design principles, process, and design thinking. And then there's this future me problem. And this is the last major piece of I shouldn't say the last, but rather the other major piece of the textbook. What can I learn now that will prepare me in the future? Or from our perspective as leadership educators, what can I teach now that will be of use later? And that moves us into design as an approach. So the design approach, mindful, purposeful, and with good affordance, the right fit. If you're trying to explore those best fits, what will really help you is confidence, optimism, resilience, and engagement. And so this is your core. So just like athletes build their core to perform whatever sport they're performing, these are things that leaders, aspiring leaders, growing leaders, which frankly includes all of us, can build to enhance their capacity to take on really difficult challenges or any challenge that they're going to face in the future. If you are confident, optimistic, resilient, and engaged, you are going to continuously improve and meet those challenges in the best way possible. The last piece about the core, we have a model that's in the book that talks about the relationship between these four elements and how they really drive and strengthen each other. And at the end of each chapter, all 16 chapters, you will find what we call core builders, core building activities. So different activities that students can engage in that will help build their core. So, that was a quick overview, and I apologize for the speed, but even though you can wield this pretty well to wake somebody up, it's still a little thick to try to get in a few minutes. So that's the framework, the design framework, and the major elements. And I'm going to hand it off to my co-authors for some highlights and insights from some of the specific chapters that they particularly like. And we're going to start with Scott. So,
thank you, sir. Thank you. So I think one really, really important thing to know about this textbook is that it doesn't have to be a design course. It could be in a college of business, it could be in a college of agriculture, it could be in student affairs. I think this text applies to all of those different contexts. We're just in a very, very nice way applying some principles that really help people think about leadership. And so when I think about this text, I think it's theory meets application kind of in their context. So theory meets application in the student's context. And I think that's one thing that I absolutely love about this text is that we are highlighting throughout examples that they can resonate with, that they can connect with, that they might be products that they're using, they might be organizations or associations they're familiar with or that they're involved in themselves. And so we really try and take this kind of integrated scholarship approach. For those of you Ernest Boyer fans, we really integrate the thinking in their context. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple things from the decision-making chapter that I absolutely love, and that I think actually helps the textbook. I think it helps its readability. I think it helps its relevance for the students. And so a couple things that stand out for me. We have each chapter at the beginning, we have a feature called Leadership That Makes a Big Difference. And so I really focus on in this decision-making chapter. I was the author, the primary author on this chapter. I really focused on examples of collegians making a big difference in the world. So you don't have to have 50 years of experience. You don't have to be a positional leader. These are men and women that made a big difference because they really, really had a unique approach to decision making. And so throughout the text, we're providing those examples. And I think that really adds something very, very nice. I think we also, if we do have a concept that might be a little more, let's say 30,000 feet, we, throughout the text, have reflection questions in the text. So if it's a concept that might be not in their specific arena, we might say, how does this apply to your student organizations, or how does this apply to your internship? And so I think that's another piece that really resonates for me, because again, it's all about making it relevant in their context. Much of this text. We also, at the very end, every chapter, we have skill builders. And so those are opportunities for students to actually develop their skills, or an instructor could make an assignment where they actually implement this. And so in the decision-making chapter, it was kind of fun because I did this activity called that was the best group project ever, because oftentimes I'll hear from students that they struggle with group projects. Well, how do you flip that and challenge them to lead a group of peers to really a great group project? And so again, in their context, putting the concepts to work in real time. And so that's another thing that's really been kind of a lot of fun as we've developed this text. You know, I'm going to talk about two more things, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jim. You know, I think another aspect of this textbook that resonates for me is that we have a number of different voices. So we have student voices, we have reflections from CEOs, from nonprofit leaders. We've brought in other experts external to this team here to provide some thinking. Kathy Allen wrote a piece in our systems thinking chapter, which was wonderful to include. And so we really tried to look at this from a 360 perspective and get a number of different vantage points. It's not just one person's, or to Tony's point, a professor or some other individual that may not. We're trying to really provide a holistic perspective. And, you know, I think one other thing that stands out for me is if we are explaining a model, so for instance, in this chapter, the decision-making chapter, we have a model and it's called Solve. We very, very much slow down and provide them with examples that will resonate. And I know I've said that already, but again, that was the most fun for me working on this text, is how do we write something that will really hit them where they are, expose them to some really great thinking and scholars and research, but make it seem relevant. And that's been our goal. And so I'm going to stop there, Tony. I don't know if you're emceeing right now. Are you, or do I just turn it over to Jim?
You can just turn it over to Jim. You're right on time. Thank you so much.
Jim, it's up to you.
All right, thanks.
On the other side.
Yeah, there were some great points that Tony and Scott made. And I think the way we looked at the book, the textbook, it's student oriented in the fact that the book is very personal. And that in chapter 3, we really focused on individuals developing a brand, a personal leadership brand, and what their capacity is. But as we read the chapter, it's very interactive. As Scott was saying, it's not just read and learn about the knowledge of leadership. It's about doing things that reflect you, the individual. So it's a very personal book, and that's what I like it. We try to treat leadership as an art where individuals can select their brand and develop their brand as they read the book. And when we get into chapters 9 and 10, what I find really fascinating is that, as Scott referred to, the chapters have models. There's all different models that the reader can look at and apply to themselves. And especially in chapter 10, which is about change, my view, and I think we all agreed, is that there's 3 levels of change. One is a personal change, self-leadership. And our theme is you have to lead yourself. If you can't lead yourself, how are you going to inspire other people to follow? So level 1, we spent a lot of time on self-leadership. And that's where the core comes in, as Tony pointed out. The core is very basic to self-leadership, because we're trying to get the individuals who are desiring to do something exciting in their life, assume a leadership role, is to really gain confidence and, be optimistic, but be resilient, but also engaged. And every chapter we keep reinforcing this because self-leadership is very important. And then level 2 is about taking yourself and changing yourself somewhat as you deal with other people. And we know about the diversity of workers today and people we're going to be doing projects with, that we have to engage people who come from different countries, have different cultures, have different expectations. And the textbook does that. It spends a lot of time on engagement and exposing the reader, the student, to, hey, this is a different kind of world out there, but there's great opportunity. And I think the word opportunity is stipulated almost each chapter. It's not that we're dealing with problems, we're dealing with opportunities. And the last part, which chapter 10 deals with, is changing and being a leader, assuming a leadership role as you attempt to change an organization, an operational function. And for example, in my classes, we actually use the campus as our laboratory for leadership. We asked our students to now begin applying what you've learned in the first 10 chapters of the textbook. Go out there and find something to change, and we give you a model to follow. And the students select the item to be changed, the issue. They follow the model. They come back and report. And we have students interacting with administrators, with the provost. We've had the president of the university come to hear some of our presentations. So this is real. We're trying to say to the students, leadership is real. It's not just reading a book and looking at words and defining definitions. It's about something that can change your life. So chapter 10 is really about change, and I think that's what the focus of our textbook is. We got to look at change as something that's very positive, something that's methodical, something that's going to occur, but it's an opportunity. As we say in class, there's time to step up to the plate. And in the student's lifetime, they're going to have moments where they have great opportunities to step up. And as Tony and Scott have said already, we're giving a lot of exercises and experiences and opportunities. In fact, in the textbook, we talk about make a difference. We have in each chapter a make a difference component, where young people, just like our students in classes, have stood up at the moment and made a difference in not only their own lives, but lives of hundreds and thousands and even millions of people around the world. So the book is about make a difference. And we try to give examples, as Scott said, of organizations, of individuals. I have one in chapter, I think it's chapter 10, Mark Atkins of Horizon, who really began with a troublesome life. He got involved in drugs and alcohol, and his life was going nowhere. And he decided that, I need to get a skill. He got a skill, and he teamed up with another individual that motivated him, inspired him. He formed a team, and they started a new business. And of course, it ended up as Horizon. And he's trying to help others. So I think that's the other aspect of this textbook. It's not only to help yourself, but to help others, help people who have great potential, they don't know it. And our role is to help individuals gain confidence that they not only can do something exciting in their life, but help other people achieve greatness. So that's what I love about the book. It's very positive, it's very insightful, and it's a little bit different than a typical leadership textbook you would read in our field. And you can see from Tony and Scott and Mindy that they're people who are they're very exciting people to work with. They have great ideas, they're great collaborators, and we're sort of an example. This textbook is an example of really what design is. We designed a textbook from 4 perspectives. We all had some different views, and we collaborated. We said, hey, let's put a book together that really covers more than you would have in a traditional leadership book. So I'm proud to be part of this and working with the team, and I hope you like the book, the textbook. It's appropriate not only for universities, but for leaders out there in the field. This is a textbook for everyone, and I think as you get involved with the textbook, you'll see that it has it's a great way to learn about leadership, but also practice it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mindy, and Mindy will talk about some of the exciting things that she got involved with the textbook. Mindy?
Thanks, Jim. I think you kind of gave a good intro into where I wanted to start with my 2 cents that I'm putting in for our webinar here. Too many introductory leadership books all look the same types of chapters, same types of features, and they get boring after a while. And I truly believe, and I was so excited to participate in this because this book really distinguishes itself as a leadership book by covering topics that are critical in today's workplace. It's not just read a theory, write a paper. You know, it's much more than that. It's much more comprehensive, and it really does provide students with meaningful insights, not only about themselves and the things that they'll need when they go out into the workplace. It also provides them meaningful insights into what others are doing. Some of the features that we have give them insights into what other students, other leaders are doing. And I think it will make the individuals stand out from the crowd when they go out into the workplace. It gives them an opportunity to change their perspectives, the lens through which they view leadership and leadership in organizations. And it really does, as Jim described, provide them with an opportunity to learn about and experiment with various principles in practice. I did a little homework, and I looked at some of you may be familiar with NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges Employers, and I'm looking at the 8 competencies that they have that are readiness for the workplace. And absolutely, we hit almost all of those in our book in terms of what we're trying, the experiences that we're trying to give students. And I was very excited about that. Things like critical thinking and problem solving, teamwork, collaboration, a work ethic, leadership, global and multicultural fluency, which obviously goes right into one of the chapters that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the chapter on culture and how excited I was to work on that. I work in an institution where we have a lot of students who never left our area. You know, we're the local university. And so we get students who have kind of a narrow perspective on the world. And I think when you give them the opportunity to explore culture, not only from a personal perspective, what does culture mean to me and who I am as an individual in my own family, in my own community, now I need, not having had those kinds of external experiences, to understand what culture means to an organization, to the world, basically. And I think the nice part about this chapter is it really does run that full gamut of understanding what a culture is in an organization, what a culture is if you're halfway around the world. You know, one of the questions we ask is, what happens if you're dropped into another place and you've never been there before? And there are some really cool videos on the instructor website where he talks about that. And he talks about how different it is to be in a different world, and people don't automatically come up and talk to you like they do in our world or in his world. And so it's just trying to help students navigate through all those differences. And you know, I don't know. I was just so excited to be involved in that. I did find one example again as I was out looking at some things last night, and that was one person indicated that she absolutely hated working for Google. And it's so important for us to make sure that we can fit in with the culture of an organization. Well, Google does a lot of socialization, a lot of activities, but that wasn't her thing. And so it's important for our students to understand those kinds of things as they're navigating through and trying to understand what it means to have culture within an organization. You know, it's very specific to that organization. They like to socialize, they like to have parties, but she was not, that was not her thing. So we need to help them. And I think there's a lot of activities that are involved here in our book that can help, help students navigate through that. I think I'll turn it back to Tony. Are you okay with that?
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I apologize for any technical problems we've got here. So before we move off of this, I just want to express how grateful I am to have worked with these three. If it weren't for Jim walking in one day to a faculty meeting probably 5 years ago saying, "Hey, I want to write a textbook. What do you think?" I don't think I would have even considered going down this path. And of course, Mindy and Scott and Jim's contributions all the way along, both in terms of edits and reviews and ideas and resources, and frankly, friendship and camaraderie have been invaluable. So it's been a pleasure, and I'm very appreciative. So with that said, let's talk about 2 tools for designing your success. This first one is really for you, the instructor. And typically, when you think about the ancillary materials to a textbook, they're things that, it's the standard test banks and PowerPoints that just have a few bulleted points. And some of our ancillary materials are like that, frankly. But we'll strive to do better in that regard. But the instructor's manual, I think we're all particularly proud of because we wanted a tool that, as you can see, will do the kinds of things for you that we would want an instructor's manual to do for us. And that is to give us the materials that will really facilitate and make our life easier. And in the instructor's manual, you will see, sorry about the, instructor's manual chapter is composed of learning objectives, detailed chapter outline, just repeats of what the textbook is, but then a wide variety of interesting activities that we've generated above and beyond the textbook, and we've separated them by activators, engagement ideas, and reinforcing ideas. Everybody still with me?
Yeah, you're going in and out a little bit, Tony.
Okay, sorry about that. And then ultimately we have instructional design notes, which are additional notes to help you all understand and us different ways, different activities to get students' attention, to adapt to different needs, to integrate their backgrounds, different ways of ordering and framing and delivering the materials, and ultimately some additional instructional strategies or tips, things that will really help enhance your success. And finally, in terms of designing your success, designing the student's success. What capacities will they need that will make them not just effective, but uniquely effective? And as we think about the integration between leadership in a particular context, entrepreneurship at large, not just starting a business, but taking the initiative to start something new within an organization or within a community, design, purposefully transitioning ideas, and then at the very start of it all, the creativity techniques and understanding to be able to see opportunities and generate lots of new and interesting ideas. So what we tried to do with this textbook was to incorporate, sorry, not sure why we're not advancing here. Well, my apologies to the studio audience. I'm not sure why this is not advancing.
Tony, have you given away the screen by chance?
Now, here we go. I'm not sure why it is malfunctioning. So this, for all of you out there, is frankly one of what I think is one of the most valuable slides of the bunch. And here's why. I quite often get emails back from alumni, and they're students who were in my leadership and creativity course or a leadership with design course, and they'll say, you know, I was in an interview and I started talking about user-centeredness, and wow, people's ears just perked up. I still hear that about people being a leadership major, but with these other elements, it really adds to it. So these are our over the top 10, and by over the top, we mean 11 different topics that you'll find within the textbook that will set your students apart, that will give them a bit of a leg up in their effectiveness and their capacity as a leader.
Tony, this is Shelley.
Yes.
Could you please, people can see your GoToWebinar control panel. And it's over the slides.
I apologize. I'm not sure why this is not particularly functioning well. I seem to have lost my mouse.
If you tell me what slide number it is, I can take the screen.
Yeah, we are on the, we have 3 slides after this. So 26. Okay, I'm back.
Yay, Shelley.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. Are we back in action? Okay, so the over the top 10, as you can see, things like leadership by design, which I explained right at the outset, developing your core, this notion of challenged aligned leadership, which is really trying to help students understand how to align their strengths, skills, and styles with the current challenges that they're facing. Brain leading, we have a chapter on brain leading, which is essentially how do you understand how people's brains work so that you can more effectively influence them. Design thinking we talked about, creativity, creative process, and idea generation. For those of you not familiar with creativity, that is something that can be learned, and that is often a pleasant shock to students. As you can see down the list, understanding followers, culture, fostering innovation, all things that will set the students apart. So if we could advance to the next and final slide. Are we there?
Yep.
Okay.
We are.
So at the very end of the day here, Discovering Leadership, we tried to introduce a tool, a textbook that was foundational, yet flexible enough for you and your program to find the best fit. And in fact, initially when we talked to Sage, we kind of wanted 5 separate little books so you could kind of pick and choose and create the program that you wanted. But the textbook industry doesn't work that way yet. So we did the best we could, and we think you'll really enjoy it. So with that, on the next slide, we have our mug shots with our current emails. And as I said, we welcome any questions directly, or we're going to turn it over to Mindy, who's going to coordinate whatever questions came in during the webinar.
A couple of them are pretty easy. One says, just to be certain, the instructor's manual is on the Sage webpage for the book, correct? That is correct. And someone else asked also about whether or not there were videos, etc. And yes, those are a part of the website. So if you go to Sage and you Google our book, as long as you have that faculty authorization to go into the website, then you can get those resources that we've put up there that Tony told you about.
And you can also order a desk copy on that page as well, correct, Mindy?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, if you go into Sage, you can get a desk copy of the book.
Yep.
One question came in: what was the student level that was considered your primary audience? That is the book best geared for undergraduate or graduate students?
Well, my initial answer is it's best suited for people who are new to the leadership field. Um, Frankly, I have met adult professionals with advanced degrees who are stepping into leadership positions in different fields, and they're thrilled to learn some tips and tools in an accessible way. It is not for graduate students in leadership. I don't think it's at that level, uh, but it is definitely for undergrads across a variety of different courses. For example, at the University of Delaware, we've integrated it into about 3 different courses, both in entrepreneurship and in leadership.
And I know, Scott, you work with this group of individuals. So I had one question that related to working with undergraduate student organization leaders using this textbook over the course of a couple of semesters. How would you feel about doing something like that as well?
Oh, sure. I mean, whether if it's the decision-making chapter that I was referencing earlier in the presentation, there's a list of how you might be the problem to why the group isn't moving forward. There's a list of different types of difficult people you might work with, or different types of team members, and what you can do, how you can scenario plan that. So what's beautiful about this textbook, and again, they are living this every day in student government, in the residence hall, in the fraternity, in the sorority, in whatever student organization or internship they have. The concepts in this text very quickly will translate to what they're experiencing. Yep. And that's what I love about it.
I was going to say chapter 12 also is on leading a team. So I think that's something that's very good, and being influential and so on and so forth. I think there's quite a few opportunities to use this in the student affairs arena as well.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that. The textbook, what I like about the textbook is extremely flexible. I use the textbook for an introductory course as well as an advanced leadership course. And what we do, we have the students, this is to build on what Scott was talking about. We have students at the, it's called Leadership and Organizations. We divide the class into 3 teams. One team focuses on a nonprofit organization. One team focuses on changing a function in a for-profit. And one team focuses on the nonprofit. So, or the public sector, I mean. For example, we use the city of Newark, where the University of Delaware is, as a lab. And our students have gone out, for example, in the public sector, they went to the Recreation and Parks Department of our government and conducted a change model and made proposals to the mayor of Newark. In the public sector, actually 4 or 5, no, maybe it's now 10 years ago, we had a group went into Joe Biden, Senator Biden's office in Wilmington, helped to reorganize the leadership roles in the office. And in the nonprofit, we've had the Newark Alliance has a nonprofit, and our students served as consultants in proposing changes in that organization, local chapter of the American Diabetes Association. And in the for-public sector, our students went into Grotto's, which is a restaurant in Newark, and a number of other businesses on Main Street. So what happens is with the textbook, it provides also a comprehensive backdrop for our students to take their skills that they learned and apply them in real life situations. So this is what I love about the textbook. It's up to the imagination of the faculty member. You can do so much with it. It's the core concepts as well as the skills, and as Scott said, the feedback and the reflections, everything sort of blends together so the students can develop their strategy no matter what kind of organization they plan to seek, their careers in. So I just wanted to emphasize that this is a book for not only for-profit leaders, but for leaders of all the different sectors.
Great, thank you. I have a question here, the second part of which we've already answered with the SAGE multimedia supplements and all of that. But the first part of the question is, what are your thoughts on using this text for online self-paced learning?
I think it's a fantastic text for that, because one of the things we purposefully have done with this is to try to create lots of interactive activities, both within the chapters and within the special features and at the end of the chapters. So you could very easily share the content and then direct them to page whatever for this activity or this particular special feature or activity, core builder toward the end, and have them do these things. For example, at the end of, it might even be chapter 1 where we introduce the core concept, there's a core scavenger hunt. And the way I typically approach this is I will break students into teams of 4, hand them each of the 4 pages, confidence, optimism, resilience, engagement, and then there's a series of like interactive things that they have to do out in the real world, some to build their confidence, some to work on their optimism, some to test their engagement, and think about them, and we debrief. So, there's lots of opportunities to do that from a distance or in person. Last thing I'll say on that is one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten from a colleague was, just because I'm not talking doesn't mean you're not learning. And students initially, particularly undergrads, seem to think that if I don't say something or I'm not the person up there telling them something, that they don't need to keep learning, that there are no other sources. And so we will start very early in the semester talking about, where do you learn? How do you learn? You learn from peers, you learn from experience, you learn from reflection, you learn from books, websites, so forth. And I think that's really, in some ways, freeing for them to shift their mindset from how they're supposed to be effective learners over the course of their career.
I teach online, and I think that you're absolutely right. I don't necessarily have to be there for them to be learning. And I think this book would lend itself both to a blended environment where I can come in and talk to them and help process, or what I do often when I'm having students do individual assessments and so on, is I craft an exercise for them to go out into the community and get feedback from coworkers, from family members, and so on. And I think this book lends itself very well to being able to do that as well.
Yeah, just to add on is I'm doing that already. I have both the blended version of introductory leadership course and a totally online version. So the book is just a natural way to take the content and present it any way you want, and it works very well on online. It's amazing because of the instructional manual, all the resources, all the videos, all the exercises. They all support the online effort. So I've done the online for 2 semesters in our summer session and winter session. University of Delaware has a special winter session and summer session, and I've done the hybrid, and they both work very well. Students loved it when we completed the evaluations. They learned a lot. They liked it. They still had accomplished all the objectives that we state in the traditional course. So the textbook works very well.
I have another question about covering the link between leadership and organizational culture, specifically the role of the leader in building and sustaining a performance-oriented culture. And I think, Tony, I'd like you to take that one, because I think you've got, and later in the book, it doesn't necessarily fall in the culture chapter, but I do think it falls later in maybe sustainability and so on.
I'm gonna pass that one to Scott, because he wrote the systems and sustainability chapter.
Sorry, Scott.
Sure. So repeat the question again, Mindy.
Certainly. So wondering how within the book, the link between leadership and organizational culture as it relates to sustaining a performance-oriented culture.
Sure. So we have a chapter on sustainability, and we define sustainability in a very, very broad way, whether that's sustainability, how many of us think of it, people, planet, profit, or maybe it's cultural sustainability, maybe it's sustaining results. It might be, we could define it in a very, very broad way. And I think the text does a very nice job of, it's not necessarily that the leader is always dictating culture, but the leader's co-creating culture, and it's a priority of that leader. And so I wish we could go back to one of Tony's original slides, but it's about leading self, and then it's about leading others. And then we just kind of slowly kind of move up the levels and give the learners different pieces to think about and focus on at those different levels. So yes, definitely that's blended in. And I would turn it over to Tony if you have anything you'd like to add.
There is one thing I'd like to add, and that is don't overlook the introductions to the modules. So in the module introductions, there's not only an overview of that particular design focus, but there's also a variety of tools that are hit upon. And in fact, in the intro to, I believe it's module 4, we talk about strategic planning and introduce a number of strategic planning tools, which would all be part of continuous improvement. So I think that speaks to that as well.
Thank you. I have one piece of feedback for us that I think is really wonderful. Thank you, William. William says, I've used this book for 2 online classes. Great resource for online students. So thank you very much. Yay. We're glad to hear that someone has used that. One other question regarding evaluation, the evaluative piece, and are you asking that question related to the book itself or to individual student evaluation? Let's see if I get a response from this person. I am so glad to have someone give us that feedback, though, that they have, like you, Jim, have used it in both environments, and it's really good to hear it from other folks as well. So I'm not getting a follow-up question to that evaluation. I think we've covered almost everything that we wanted to. Anybody else have any other kinds of information that they would like to share?
Well, I think we might want to highlight just a couple of the special features. I know that all of the authors took a good deal of time to create those and to add content to those that were really meaningful. So Jim mentioned leadership that makes a difference, and that's a vignette of some sort that starts every chapter, and the wide variety ranging from children making a difference to veterans to just a very broad range.
Yeah.
The leadership by design feature I mentioned, that happens 40 times throughout the text, so there's lots of those tools involved. One called Myth or Reality. So there are lots of myths out there about leadership, and so those features pose one of those myths and then answer the question whether it's a myth or reality. And I think any of these features, those mentioned and the others, can be used as fun activities for the students. So definitely something that you can build into your classes and your classroom. We also have these experts beyond the text. So these were folks that were invited, like Scott mentioned, Kathy Allen was invited. I invited actually a former graduate student to talk about leadership in China and talk about how that different culture looks at leadership a little bit differently. We have one on followership. So these are topics that are a little more advanced for an intro leadership, but there's still something that people should be aware of. We have one called Moments of Awareness, which are we've all had those moments where we're like, ooh, I really messed that up, but boy, did I learn from that, right? So these are those moments of awareness, and we profile a number of those. And then at the end of every chapter, we have the core attribute builders, as well as skill builder activities. So again, activities that can be assigned as homework, can be done in class, or can simply be done independently.
Yeah, I think one more item, Tony, is this is an excellent textbook for a flipped classroom. I tried flipping the classroom procedure, and I was surprised how the students picked up on this. And I was always curious about the flipped classroom, whether that really could work and be effective. But I tried it out as an experiment, and I was amazed. I was just amazed that the students could follow along, do the exercises, do the feedbacks, the reflections. And when they came to class, it gave a lot of time for discussion and for application. So for anybody who's interested in the flipped classroom, you may want to contact me or try it yourself. The book is just designed so for different kinds of instructional strategies. And as I said before, the flipped classroom is something that it seems that it's a natural for the textbook.
And we can't underestimate that instructor's manual, because we wrote so much content that Sage says we need to pare these things down. And that just provided a wonderful opportunity to put so much more in that resource. It's incredible. It really is.
So I have two more questions, and they're both related. So I'll kind of put them together. It's about how to get the book. One person's not a faculty member, and the other person doesn't say whether or not he or she is a faculty member. But for those who are not, you can go to the web, to the Sage website, and you can just order the book. If you're a faculty member, you can request a faculty review copy of the book from the website. And
I think it's also available on Amazon.
oh, that's true. I didn't even think about that. And someone says, thank you for this webinar. I've adopted your book for my undergraduate leadership course this semester. So it's nice to hear that people are adopting the book as well. So just wanted to add those two things in there.
Well, I will reiterate, it's an open invitation to folks out there. If you have additional questions, or as you use the book, you're thinking, okay, well, how do you use this? How could I use that? What are your thoughts? We are really a learning community. We always have been. I've known these folks for years and years and years, and particularly Scott and I go back, feels like all the way back to like Little League years or something. But we've always been a learning community and supporting each other and sharing ideas, and that is really what this is all about. So we hope you have fun discovering leadership.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Yeah, I hope we enjoy the book.